I woke up from a 9-hour surgery to see over 70 missed calls. I thought someone was hurt, but the accident was my property. My dad's voicemail sounded calm, like he was ordering pizza, saying they sold my condo for $425,000 to pay for my sister's wedding. While I could not move my legs, they signed for me, turning 8 years of my life into a wedding day. My name is Lily Berry. The first thing I knew was the light. It was a sterile, aggressive white that seemed to hum against my eyelids before I even opened them. It felt like someone had scrubbed the inside of my skull with steel wool. My mouth tasted like old pennies and dry cotton. I tried to swallow, but my throat was a desert, scraped raw by the breathing tube they had just pulled out. I blinked, the world swimming into focus in blurry, nauseating waves, ceiling tiles, dotted patterns, a vent blowing cold air directly onto my forehead. The rhythmic beep of a monitor somewhere to my left was the only thing anchoring me to the timeline. I was in the recovery room. I was alive. I tried to shift my weight, and a dull, grinding pressure radiated from my lower back. It wasn't pain, not yet. The anesthesia was still doing its heavy lifting, masking the fact that a surgeon had just spent 9 hours rearranging my vertebrae and fusing bone. I was numb from the waist down, a heavy, dead weight that panic whispered might be permanent. Even though the doctors had promised it was temporary, my hand moved before my brain fully commanded it. It was a clumsy, heavy thing, searching the railing of the hospital bed. I needed to know the time. I needed to know if I had made it through the window without complications. My fingers brushed the cold metal of the side table and knocked against my phone. It lit up. The screen was a chaotic waterfall of notifications. My eyes, still gritty and slow to focus, struggled to make sense of the blocks of text. 72 missed calls, 49 text messages. The timestamp said it was 2 in the afternoon. I had gone under at 5 in the morning, 9 hours. My stomach twisted. A cold snake coiling in my gut that had nothing to do with the surgery. 72 calls. Someone was dead. That was the only explanation. Mom, Dad, or Brielle. Someone had been in a car crash. Someone had a heart attack. Why else would they blow up my phone while they knew I was under the knife? They knew the schedule. I had sent them the itinerary 3 times. I fumbled with the passcode, my fingers feeling like sausages. I bypassed the texts, mostly from Mom, strings of emojis and urgent demands to call now, and went straight to the voicemail. There was one new message from my father. I pressed the phone against my ear, my hand trembling not from emotion, but from the chemical aftershocks of the anesthesia. Lily. My dad's voice filled my ear. He didn't sound like someone who was grieving. He didn't sound like someone standing in an emergency room. He sounded breezy. He sounded like he was standing in line at a deli, deciding between ham or turkey. Hey, kiddo, look, I know you're probably just waking up, and you're going to be groggy, but we had to make an executive decision today. A big one, but a good one. He paused. I could hear background noise, clinking glasses, laughter. Was that champagne? We got an offer on the condo, he continued, his voice dropping slightly, feigning a conspiratorial tone. A cash offer, a buyer who wanted to close immediately, no inspections, no waiting, $425,000. Lily, $425,000. Do you have any idea what that kind of liquidity does for us right now? The room seemed to tilt. The beep of the monitor sped up, a rapid-fire staccato that matched the sudden thudding of my heart against my ribs. We sold it, he said. The words were simple, monosyllabic, nuclear. Mom and I signed the paperwork this morning while you were in surgery. We figured. Why wake you up with the stress? Brielle's wedding budget was blowing up. Honey, you know how she is. She wanted the venue in Napa, and the deposit was due by noon today or we'd lose the date. So, we handled it. We sold the condo. The money is in the family account now. It's done. We saved the wedding. He cleared his throat. A sound I knew meant he was bracing for an argument he deemed unreasonable. Don't worry about the logistics. We'll hire movers to pack your stuff up next week. You can stay in the guest room at our place while you recover. It's better this way. You shouldn't be alone in that apartment anyway, okay? Call us when you're lucid. Love you. Click. The silence that followed was louder than the hospital machinery. I didn't cry. I expected to. I expected the hot sting of tears, the hyperventilating, the panic, but none of that came. Instead, a sensation akin to hypothermia washed over me. It started at the base of my neck and spread downward, freezing my blood, extinguishing the fog of the anesthesia instantly. It was a clarity so sharp it felt dangerous. They sold my home, my condo in Denver, the one I had bought 8 years ago, the one I had scraped and starved for, working double shifts at Ironvale Solutions, eating ramen and skipping vacations so I could put down the down payment, the one that was solely in my name, my sanctuary, sold, for a wedding for Brielle, my 28-year-old sister who treated life like a buffet she hadn't paid for. Miss Barry? A face appeared above me. A nurse. She looked kind, tired, and concerned. She glanced at the monitor, which was now screaming about my elevated heart rate. Your heart rate is spiking. Honey, are you in pain? Do you need a bolus for the pain? I can push more morphine. I looked at her. I really looked at her. She was a stranger. Yet she had shown more concern for my physical state in 5 seconds than my entire family had in my 32 years of existence. No, I croaked. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. No morphine. You just had a spinal fusion. Lily, the block is going to wear off in about 20 minutes. You need to stay ahead of the pain. I need a charger, I whispered, holding up my phone. The battery was at 12%. And I need a minute, a quiet minute. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a generic charging cable, plugging it into the wall behind me. 5 minutes, then I have to check your incision. She stepped out, pulling the curtain half closed. I plugged the phone in. My hand was shaking violently now. The rage was metabolizing the drugs in my system, turning the sluggishness into a vibrating, high-frequency energy. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I called Dad. He answered on the first ring. Lily, you're up. His voice was booming. Kendra, Lily's on the phone. Bemoaning the inevitable, I bet. I heard my mother's voice in the background, faint but distinct. Dad, I said. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the breath hitched in my chest. The pain in my back was waking up, a dull roar beginning to assert itself. What did you do? We saved the day. Lil, that's what we did, he said, sounding almost offended that I wasn't thanking him. Look, I know it's a shock. We didn't want to do it without asking, but the timing was impossible. You were under anesthesia. The buyer was standing there with a cashier's check. It was a now or never situation. It wasn't your house to sell, I said. Every word felt heavy, like I was lifting a stone. It is my name on the deed, my name on the mortgage. How did you sign? I was unconscious. I was cut open on a table. Details, he scoffed. We're your parents. We signed as your proxies. We told the notary you were unavailable due to a medical emergency and that we had verbal authorization. It's family business. Lily, nobody looks that close when it's family. You forged my signature? I asked. I needed him to say it. I needed to hear the confession. We signed on your behalf, he corrected, his tone hardening. Don't use words like forged. Lily, it's ugly. We did what had to be done. Brielle has been crying for 3 days about this venue. This is her moment. You know how fragile she is. She needs this win. I have a mortgage, I said, staring at the ceiling tile directly above me. There was a water stain shaped like a grim reaper. I have equity. That was $425,000 of asset. That was my retirement. That was my safety net. And you're smart, Dad laughed, a dismissive, barking sound. You're the smart one. Lily, you always land on your feet. You have that fancy job at Ironvale. You can buy another place in a year or two. Brielle? Well, Brielle isn't like you. She needs the help. You can earn it back. It's just money. Just money. 8 years of missed holidays. 8 years of driving a car with a broken heater so I could pay down the principal. 8 years of building a fortress around myself so I would never, ever have to ask them for anything. "You stole from me," I said. "While I was in surgery." "Stop it," Dad snapped. The nice guy mask slipped, revealing the steel underneath. "Stop playing the victim. We raised you. We fed you. We paid for your braces. You owe this family. And frankly, it's selfish of you to hoard a $500,000 asset while your sister is trying to start her life. We made a decision for the greater good of the family. The money is already transferred to the wedding planner and the venue. It's gone. So you can either scream about it and ruin your recovery, or you can be a big sister and be happy that you could help." "I didn't help," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You robbed me. I'm hanging up now." "Lily," Dad said, his voice cold and final. "The drugs are making you irrational. We'll come visit you tomorrow when you've calmed down. Don't cause a scene. We're doing this for Brielle." The line went dead. I lowered the phone. The screen was warm against my cheek. The pain in my back was no longer a dull roar. It was a scream. It felt like someone was driving a railroad spike into my lumbar spine. But strangely, the physical pain was grounding. It was real. It was honest. It didn't lie to me. It didn't tell me it loved me while it robbed me blind. My parents had sold my home. They had impersonated me. They had committed fraud. And they had done it with the absolute, unshakable confidence that I would never do anything about it. They banked on Lily the doormat, Lily the peacekeeper, Lily who would swallow glass if it meant keeping the family dinner quiet. They thought I would be too ashamed to sue my own parents. They thought I would be too weak to fight back while learning how to walk again. They were right about the old Lily, but the old Lily didn't wake up in this room. The old Lily died on the operating table. I took a deep breath, wincing as my ribs expanded. I didn't call my best friend. I didn't call my boss. I opened my contacts and scrolled past Mom and Dad and Brielle. I scrolled until I found a number I had saved 3 years ago, back when I bought the condo. Just in case of a boundary dispute with a neighbor that never happened. I hit dial. It rang once, twice. "Law offices of Calder and Associates," a professional voice answered. "I need to speak to Grant Calder," I said. My voice was no longer gravel. It was steel. "My name is Lily Berry. I am currently in a hospital bed, and I need to report a massive real estate fraud involving a property worth $425,000. One moment. Please." I closed my eyes and listened to the hold music. It was the sweetest sound I had heard all day. My parents wanted a wedding? Fine. I would give them a show, but they had no idea that by selling my house, they had just handed me the match to burn theirs down. To understand why the voicemail on my phone felt like a physical amputation, you have to understand that the condo was not just a box of drywall and glass. It was the only evidence I had that I existed outside of my utility to other people. If I rewind the tape 7 weeks, back before the anesthesia and the betrayal, I was sitting in a sterile consultation room in downtown Denver. My surgeon, a man with hands steady enough to dismantle a bomb, pointed to the MRI on the screen. He told me he could fix it. He told me that the grinding agony that had been the background noise of my life for a decade could be silenced. I remember walking out to the parking lot that day. The Colorado air was thin and crisp, biting at my cheeks, for the first time in years. I did not dread the future. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, and I cried. Not because I was scared of the surgery, but because I finally had an expiration date for the pain. I drove home that night to the condo. It was a 1-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a converted brick building. It was not a mansion. It was barely 900 square feet. The balcony was small, just enough room for 2 chairs and a dying fern, but it looked out over the city lights. I had bought it 8 years ago. That purchase was the hardest thing I had ever done. I worked at Iron Veil Solutions, a tech firm that ate people alive and spit out the bones. My official title was Senior Project Manager, but my actual job description was Professional Crisis Aversion. I spent 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, putting out fires started by engineers who had god complexes and marketing directors who promised impossible features. The stress at Ironvale was a physical weight. I lost hair. I developed an ulcer. I missed birthdays and happy hours. I saved every single bonus, every single overtime payout, every single cent that did not go to rent or ramen noodles, while my friends were backpacking through Europe or buying new cars. I was hoarding cash like a dragon scared of winter. When I finally signed the closing papers on the condo, my hand shook. It was mine. It was the physical manifestation of every panic attack I had suppressed and every weekend I had sacrificed. My parents did not help me buy it. In fact, the week I closed on the place, my father asked to borrow $2,000 to fix the transmission on his truck. I gave it to him. He never paid it back. That was the dynamic. That was the rule of law in the Barry household. So, 7 weeks ago, when I got the surgery date, I made the mistake of thinking that a spinal fusion might be a big enough event to shift the gravity of our family. I thought, just for a moment, that my physical vulnerability might trump my sister's social calendar. I called my mother on a Tuesday evening. November 15th, I said, trying to keep the wobble out of my voice. That is the date. Mom, it is a major surgery. They are going in through the front and the back. I will be in the hospital for 4 days, and then I will need significant help at home for at least 2 weeks. I cannot bend, lift, or twist. There was a pause on the line. I could hear the rustling of paper in the background. November 15th, my mother repeated, her voice distant. Oh, Lily, that is really tight. Tight? I asked. What do you mean, tight? That is right in the middle of the final vendor walkthroughs for Brielle, she said, her tone implying that I had deliberately scheduled my medical emergency to inconvenience a florist. We have the tasting menu finalized on the 14th, and then we have to drive to Santa Fe to meet with the lighting designers on the 16th. Brielle is very anxious about the lighting. Lily, you know how she gets. I closed my eyes. I was sitting on my couch, the one I had paid for, in the apartment I owned, feeling like a child begging for scraps. Mom, I said, I am having my spine fused. I will not be able to walk to the bathroom by myself. I need someone to drive me home from the hospital. I need someone to make sure I do not fall down the stairs. Well, of course we want you to be safe, she said, her voice taking on that defensive edge she used whenever she was about to let me down. But you are asking us to drop everything during the most critical weeks of your sister's life. This wedding is a massive production. Lily, we cannot just abandon Brielle. She needs support. She gets overwhelmed so easily. There it was, the family mantra. Brielle needs support. My sister was 28 years old. She was beautiful, charming, and utterly helpless by design. She lived her life as if she were the protagonist of a movie where someone else was always responsible for paying the bill. She called her lifestyle curating an image. I called it unemployment. Brielle believed that she deserved nice things simply because she appreciated them more than other people. She would look at a $3,000 handbag and say she needed it because it spoke to her soul. My parents, terrified of her tantrums and addicted to her praise, fed this delusion. They paid her rent, they leased her car, and now they were financing a wedding that cost more than the average American home. I am not asking you to abandon her, I said, gripping the phone. I am asking you to pick me up from the hospital. We can hire a nurse for you, Mom said, the solution clearly already forming in her head to absolve her guilt. Or you can take an Uber Black. They are very comfortable. We will send you flowers. Honey, huge ones. But we really cannot risk upsetting the timeline right now. Brielle is on the edge. I am the one going under the knife, I snapped, my patience fracturing. Brielle is just picking out napkins. Don't be jealous, Lily, Mom sighed. It is not becoming. You have always been the strong one. You can handle things. Brielle, she needs to be lifted up. Why can you not just be happy that she found a good man? I hung up. I did not call back. I arranged for a medical transport service to take me to the hospital. I hired a visiting nurse to come check on me for the first 3 days. I prepared to go through the most terrifying physical experience of my life alone. Surrounded by the walls I had bought with my own money, I thought that was the bottom. I thought the rejection was the worst they could do. But the universe has a funny way of showing you that the floor is actually a trap door. 1 week before the surgery, the phone rang again. It was Mom. I was in the middle of deep cleaning the condo, scrubbing the baseboards because I knew I would not be able to bend down for months. I saw her name on the screen and, like a fool, I answered. I thought maybe, just maybe, she was calling to wish me luck, or to tell me they had changed their minds and would come to sit in the waiting room. Hey, Mom, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. Lily, we have a crisis, she said. No hello? No, how are you feeling about the surgery? My heart jumped. Is Dad okay? It is the venue, she said, her voice trembling with a stress that felt performative. They hit us with a surcharge, something about insurance and the historic preservation clause. They need another $20,000 by next Friday, or they are going to cancel the reservation. Brielle is hysterical. She has locked herself in the bathroom. I leaned against the kitchen counter, looking at the granite I had picked out 3 years ago. That sounds stressful. It is a disaster, Mom said. We are tapped out. Lily, we have already liquidated the savings. We maxed out the credit cards for the caterer. We need cash. The silence stretched. I knew what was coming. I had heard this song before. We were wondering, she started, her voice shifting into that sweet, wheedling tone she used when she wanted something. You have done so well at Iron Vale. You always have that rainy day fund. Could you spot us the 20,000? Just for a few months, until after the wedding. We will pay you back from the gift money. I almost laughed. It would have been a bitter, ugly sound. They wanted $20,000 for a venue fee, while I was preparing to pay a surgeon to drill screws into my vertebrae. Mom, I said, my voice low, I am having surgery in 7 days. I have to pay my deductible. I have to pay the nurse I had to hire because you guys are too busy. I have to pay my mortgage while I am on short-term disability leave, which only pays 60% of my salary. I do not have $20,000 to give you. You have savings, she pressed. We know you do. You are so frugal. That is my safety net, I said. That is for if the surgery goes wrong. That is for if I lose my job. It is not for Brielle's historic preservation fee. It is a loan, Lily, she snapped. Family helps family. Why do you always have to make it so hard? Why do you have to be so selfish? I am not being selfish, I said, feeling the old, familiar shame rising up, the programming they had installed in me since birth. I am being responsible. I cannot give you the money. You won't, she corrected. You won't give it to us. You want to see your sister fail. You want to see us humiliated. I want to have a spine that works, I said. That is my priority. Fine, Mom spat. Fine, keep your money. Hug it tight at night, but do not expect us to come running when you are lonely. You made your choice. You always disappoint this family when it really counts. She hung up on me. That was the last time I spoke to her before I went into the hospital. I stood in my kitchen, the phone silent in my hand. I looked around at my living room. I looked at the books on the shelves, the rug I had bought on sale, the painting of the mountains I had found at a flea market. This place was my shield. It was the one thing that stood between me and the chaotic, draining vortex of my family. They saw me as a resource, a bank account with legs. But this condo, this title deed with my name on it, was proof that I was a person, proof that I had boundaries. I went to bed that night feeling a heavy, dark dread. I thought it was fear of the surgery. I was wrong. It was instinct. I did not know it then. But that phone call was the catalyst. My refusal was the trigger. By saying no to the $20,000 loan, I had backed them into a corner. I had forced them to look for another source of liquidity. And because they viewed me not as an independent adult, but as an extension of themselves, an extension that had malfunctioned by refusing a command, they decided to bypass my consent entirely. They knew I would be unconscious. They knew I would be helpless. They knew where the deed was kept, or at least how to access the digital records. They did not see a daughter undergoing a life-altering medical procedure. They saw an asset that was temporarily unguarded. I looked at the text message timestamp again as I sat in the hospital bed, the reality settling over me like a shroud. Mom, you always disappoint this family. She had said that to me a week ago, and then, while I was bleeding on a surgical table, she had signed my name and sold my life to make sure her golden child didn't have to change venues. The nurse walked back into the room to check my incision, pulling me out of the memory. "How is the pain?" she asked softly. "The back is fine," I said, staring at the phone in my hand where the lawyer's hold music was still playing. "But I think I'm going to need that quiet minute you promised." I was done being the disappointment. I was done being the safety net. They wanted to talk about what people deserved? Fine. I was about to show them exactly what they had purchased with my $425,000. The timeline of a crime is rarely a straight line. It is a series of overlapping circles, and if you look closely enough at the edges where they intersect, you can see exactly where the blood began to spill. I lay in the hospital bed, the phone hot against my ear, listening to Grant Calder explain the mechanics of theft. The anesthesia was fading, replaced by the sharp, biting clarity of adrenaline. My back throbbed in time with my heartbeat, a constant reminder that I was physically incapacitated, which was exactly what my parents had counted on, to understand how they did it. I had to mentally retrace the steps of my own surgery day. It had started at 5:30 in the morning. I remembered the cold air of the pre-op room, the way the hospital gown tied loosely at the back, leaving me feeling exposed and shivering. I remembered the nurse, a woman named Sarah with kind eyes, handing me a clear plastic bag for my personal effects. "Phone, glasses, jewelry," she had said gently. "Everything goes in here. We will lock it in the security locker until you are in recovery." I had hesitated before dropping my phone into the bag. My thumb had hovered over the screen. I had one unread message from my mother, sent at 5:14 in the morning. "Things are messy right now. Just focus on sleeping." At the time, standing there in my shivering vulnerability, I had interpreted the text as a frantic, poorly worded expression of maternal stress. I thought she meant the wedding planning was messy. I thought she meant her emotions were messy. I thought, foolishly, that she was telling me to sleep because she wanted me to rest. I dropped the phone into the bag. Sarah sealed it. That was the signal. "Mr. Calder," I said, my voice rasping slightly. I handed my phone over at 5:45. I was under anesthesia by 6:15. The surgery lasted 9 hours. "That is a very wide window, Lily," Grant said. His voice was deep, devoid of the pity I was getting from the nurses. He sounded like a man who solved puzzles for a living, and I was just another scattered set of pieces. In the world of cash real estate transactions, 9 hours is an eternity. If they had a buyer lined up, they could have closed in 45 minutes. "But how?" I asked. "I am the owner, sole owner. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. I was not there to sign." "There are 2 ways this happens," Grant explained, his tone clinical. "Option 1 is forgery. Someone physically pretends to be you, flashes a fake ID that looks enough like you to pass a cursory glance, and signs your name. But that is risky with a notary present. Option 2, and this is what I suspect given who we are dealing with, is a fraudulent power of attorney." "Power of attorney," I repeated. The words tasted like ash. "If they presented a document stating that you had granted them power of attorney to handle your real estate affairs," Grant continued, "and if they had a notary who was either negligent or complicit, they could sign the closing documents as your agents. They would sign their own names. But on your behalf, it creates a veneer of legality that satisfies a title company that just wants to close the deal and get their commission." I closed my eyes. The darkness behind my eyelids was spinning. "They have my social security number," I whispered. "They have my birth certificate. They have everything." Exactly, Grant said. And they knew exactly where you were. You were the perfect victim, Lily. You were not just away. You were medically erased from the world. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just that they had sold the condo, it was the premeditation. This wasn't a frantic, last-minute decision made because a venue fee was due. You do not manufacture a power of attorney document in 5 minutes. You do not find a cash buyer willing to drop $425,000 on a property in an hour. This had been in the works for weeks. My mind flashed back to a conversation from 3 weeks ago. I was at my parents' house for a rare Sunday dinner. Dad had been unusually chatty, asking me about my filing system. "Hey, Lil," he had said, swirling his scotch. "We are updating the family trust. Just standard estate planning stuff. I need to make sure we have the correct legal descriptions for everyone's assets in case, God forbid, something happens. Can you send me a picture of the deed to your condo? Just the front page with the parcel number." I had sent it to him. I had taken a picture of the deed and texted it to him right there at the dinner table. I had felt proud that he was including me in the family trust. I thought it meant he saw me as an adult. I was not being included. I was being cased. I thought about the phone calls from Mom over the last 10 days. They hadn't been checking on my health. So, the surgeon said 6 in the morning? She had asked 4 days ago. And you are completely out for how long? 9 hours? And then in recovery for 2 more? Okay. Just want to know when to pray. She wasn't praying. She was synchronizing her watch. They planned this, I said into the phone. Grant, they planned this weeks ago. My dad asked for the deed information. My mom confirmed the surgical window. That makes it grand larceny, Grant said, and conspiracy to commit fraud, and likely wire fraud since the funds were transferred electronically. We are talking about federal charges. Lily, if you want to go that route. If I want to go that route, the phrase hung in the air. I hung up with Grant, promising to send him everything I had. I needed to hear it from the source. I needed to hear my father say it without the veneer of a voicemail. I dialed his number again. Lily, he answered. He sounded annoyed now. I told you we are visiting you tomorrow. We are in the middle of a tasting. I just got off the phone with a real estate attorney, I said. I was shocked by how steady my voice sounded. It was the calm of the eye of the storm. He says that what you did is a felony, several felonies. Actually, forgery, fraud, grand larceny. Don't use legal words you don't understand, Dad snapped. We didn't forge anything. We signed as your parents. We were acting in your best interest because you were incapacitated. I was not incapacitated when you drafted the plan, I countered. You asked for my deed 3 weeks ago. You set this up. You waited until I was unconscious to pull the trigger because you knew I would say no. We knew you would be selfish, he corrected. We knew you would hoard that asset while your sister suffered. We made the executive decision to redistribute the family resources where they were needed most. It is not a family resource, I yelled, my voice finally cracking, straining my dry throat. It is my house. I paid the mortgage. I paid the down payment. You have never put a dime into that property. We raised you, Dad roared back. We put 32 years into you. You think you became a success in a vacuum? You owe us. And now, you have paid us back. It is done. The money is spent. Lily, the check cleared an hour ago. The venue is paid. The caterer is paid. The florist is paid. You spent $400,000 in one afternoon? I asked, horrified. It goes fast when you want the best, he said, his voice dropping back to that chilling casualness. Look, stop threatening us with lawyers. You are not going to sue us. Why are you so sure? Because we are your family, he said simply. And you are a Barry. We don't air our dirty laundry. You are not going to put your father in handcuffs. You are not going to ruin your sister's wedding day by dragging this into court. You are going to be angry for a while. And then you are going to get over it. Because you don't have anyone else. Who is going to take care of you after this surgery? Us. You need us. He was right about one thing. He was betting on my fear. He was betting on the fact that for 32 years, I had been trained to fear their disapproval more than death. He was betting that I would rather lose a house than lose the illusion of being loved. "You are right," I said softly. "I know I am," he said, smugness dripping from the speaker. "Now, get some rest. We will bring you some soup tomorrow." "I mean, you are right that I won't sue you today," I said. "Goodbye, Dad." I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking with the effort of holding back a scream that would have shattered the windows. He thought he had won. He thought the game was over because he held the king and the queen, but he forgot that I was the one keeping the score. I opened my phone's photo album. I started scrolling back. I found the screenshot of the text message where I sent him the deed. Timestamp: January 10th, 7:45 in the evening. I found the text where Mom asked about the anesthesia duration. Timestamp: January 25th, 2:30 in the afternoon. I went into my voicemail and saved the audio file of his confession. Timestamp: today, 2:03 in the afternoon. I went into my call log and took screenshots of the 72 missed calls. They weren't calls of concern. They were calls to check if I was awake yet, to see if the coast was clear. I organized them all into a folder. I named the folder The Wedding Gift. My thumb hovered over the email app. I drafted a new email to Grant Calder. I attached every screenshot. I attached the audio file. I wrote a detailed timeline of every conversation, every request for information, every subtle manipulation that had led to this moment. I was not just a victim of theft. I was a witness to a conspiracy. I hit send. The little swoosh sound of the email departing felt more satisfying than any conversation I had ever had with my parents. I lay back against the pillows, the exhaustion finally clawing at the edges of my consciousness. The pain medication was wearing off, and the fire in my spine was returning. But I didn't call the nurse. I stared at the white ceiling tiles, counting the little dots. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Grant. I picked it up, expecting a confirmation that he had received the files. Instead, the message read, "Lily, I am looking at the county recorder's database right now to pull the history on the condo, but something else popped up under your social security number. I need to come to the hospital. Tonight. We need to talk." I frowned, typing back with one hand. "What is it? Is it about the condo?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. No. Grant wrote, "It is not the condo. According to the Larimer County records, you own another property, a single-family home in Fort Collins. And Lily, the tax records show it has been in your name for 14 years. I stared at the screen. Fort Collins. That was where my parents lived. I dropped the phone on my chest. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing in. I owned a house? I owned their house? The pain in my back was forgotten. A new kind of numbness took over, one that had nothing to do with anesthesia. Grant was coming, and I had a feeling that the $425,000 was just the tip of the iceberg. Grant Calder arrived at the hospital just as the night shift nurses were doing their rounds. He looked out of place in the sterile, fluorescent-lit room. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, and he carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain a body. He didn't bring flowers or balloons. He brought the one thing I actually needed: paperwork. He pulled a visitor chair close to my bed, the metal legs scraping against the linoleum floor with a sound that made me wince. My back was a solid block of throbbing heat, but my mind was sharpening by the minute. The initial shock of the voicemail had hardened into a cold, jagged determination. "How are you holding up?" Grant asked, opening his briefcase. His voice was low, professional, devoid of the pity I had been seeing in everyone else's eyes all day. "I have been better," I said, adjusting the bed incline. "I have also been poorer, apparently." Grant didn't smile. He pulled out a blue file folder and laid it on the rolling table that usually held my hospital food. He opened it, revealing a stack of documents with colorful sticky tabs, flagging various pages. "I pulled the closing documents from the title company," Grant said, getting straight to business. "It was a rush job. Lily, sloppy in some places, but legally binding enough to transfer the title. I want you to look at this." He pointed to the bottom of a page titled Grant Deed. There, on the signature line, was my name, Lily Berry. I stared at the ink. It was black ballpoint. The letters were shaky, the loops too wide, the slant leaning aggressively to the left. My handwriting was tight, small, and slanted to the right. This looked like someone had tried to copy my signature from memory while writing with their non-dominant hand. "That is not my signature," I said, tracing the air above the paper with my finger. "It does not even look like my signature. How did a notary pass this?" "The notary is a friend of your father's from the country club," Grant said. I looked him up. "We can get his license revoked, certainly, but that does not undo the sale immediately." He flipped a few pages to the settlement statement. "Here is the hard truth. Lily," Grant said, meeting my eyes. "The buyer is an LLC called High Altitude Investments, based on what I can see. They are what the law calls a bona fide purchaser for value." "What does that mean in English?" I asked. "It means they bought the property in good faith," he explained. "They paid fair market value. They had no reason to suspect fraud. They did not know your parents were impersonating you. Because of that, the law tends to protect their claim to the property. If we sue to get the condo back, we are looking at 2, maybe 3 years of litigation. And in the meantime, the buyer keeps the condo." I felt the air leave my lungs. "So the house is gone?" "Effectively, yes. For now," Grant said. "And the money? The $425,000 was wired to a joint account your parents control, and then immediately dispersed. I tracked the outflows: $50,000 to a catering company, $30,000 to a florist, $80,000 to a venue in Napa. It is hemorrhaging. Lily, by the time we get a judge to freeze their assets, the money will be champagne and cake." I closed my eyes. It was one thing to know it in the abstract. It was another to hear the forensic accounting of my financial ruin. They hadn't just stolen my house. They had incinerated the value of it. 8 years of savings, gone in 8 hours. "I am 32 years old," I whispered, "and I have nothing." "That is what I thought." "Too," Grant said. The tone of his voice changed. It wasn't the apologetic tone of a lawyer delivering bad news anymore. It was sharper, curious. I opened my eyes. Grant had closed the blue folder and pushed it to the side. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a second folder. This one was red. "When I ran the title search on your condo," Grant said, "I ran a search on your Social Security number for all real estate holdings in the state of Colorado. Standard procedure. I wanted to make sure they hadn't taken out lines of credit in your name or liens you didn't know about." "Did they?" I asked, bracing myself. "No," Grant said. "But I found a deed, a warranty deed recorded 14 years ago." He slid a document across the table. It looked older, the scans slightly grainy. "Lily," Grant asked, watching my face carefully, "do you own a property in Fort Collins?" I frowned. "No, I have never lived in Fort Collins as an adult. I grew up there, but I moved to Denver for college and never went back." "Look at the address," Grant said. Tapping the paper, I looked. 742 Maple Ridge Drive, Fort Collins, Colorado. My breath hitched. I knew that address. I knew it better than my own phone number. I knew the crack in the driveway. I knew the way the third step on the porch creaked when it rained. I knew the smell of the cedar closet in the hallway. "That is my parents' house," I said. "That is the house I grew up in. They have lived there for 20 years. "Look at the grantee," Grant said. I looked at the line he was pointing to. Grantee. Lily Berry. A single woman. I blinked, waiting for the words to change. They didn't. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "Why is my name on their house?" Grant leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I did some digging into the history. 14 years ago, your grandmother, your mother's mother, passed away. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said. "Grandma Rose. She died when I was 18. "The house originally belonged to her," Grant said. "Your parents were living there. but the title was in her name. When she died, the property went into probate. At that same time, based on public court records, your father was facing a significant lawsuit from a failed business venture, and your mother had a series of federal tax liens filed against her. The memories came rushing back, fragmented and hazy. I remembered the hushed arguments in the kitchen. I remembered Dad drinking more than usual. I remembered them telling me that legal stuff was boring and I shouldn't worry about it. I was a freshman in college, distracted by exams and new freedom. I had signed whatever papers they put in front of me, thinking it was for financial aid or student loans. They couldn't inherit the house, I realized, the puzzle pieces slamming together. If they took title, the creditors would have seized it. The IRS would have put a lien on it. Exactly, Grant said. They needed a clean vessel, someone with no debt, no legal baggage, no history. You? But they never told me, I said. For 14 years, they have walked around acting like they own that place. They renovated the kitchen. They put in a pool. They acted like owners because they knew you didn't know, Grant said. They treated you like a holding company, a shell corporation. They put the asset in your name to shield it from their liabilities, assuming that because you were their daughter. You would never check, and even if you did, you would never do anything about it. I looked at the deed again. Lily Berry. It wasn't just a house, it was a fortress, and I held the keys. Wait, I said, a sudden thought making my stomach turn. If I own the house, do they pay rent? Grant shook his head. I saw no evidence of a lease agreement, no rental income reported on your tax returns, which, by the way, means they have probably been filing your taxes for you or manipulating the data if you haven't seen this asset listed. But legally? No, they are tenants at will. Or, more accurately, since there is no lease, they are guests who have overstayed their welcome. I stared at the white wall, but I didn't see the hospital room anymore. I saw my parents standing in that kitchen, my kitchen, laughing about selling my condo. I saw my father pouring a drink, standing on the hardwood floors that belonged to me, boasting about how he had handled the situation. I saw my mother planning a wedding for Brielle, sitting at a dining table that sat inside 4 walls that were legally mine. The irony was so thick it choked me. They had sold the one home I knew I owned, the one I had bought with my own sweat and blood, to pay for a party. And all the while, they were sleeping safely every night in a home that belonged to the daughter they had just betrayed. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They thought they had left me homeless. They don't know that I know, I said softly. There is no way they could know, Grant said. Unless they have a reason to check the county clerk's website in the last 3 hours, they think this is a secret buried 14 years deep. I looked at Grant. So, let me get this straight. They sold my condo for $425,000. They forged my signature. They stole the equity. Correct, Grant said. But, I continued, my voice gaining strength, they are currently living in a house that is titled solely in my name, a house worth, what? In that neighborhood in Fort Collins? Grant checked his notes. Current market estimate is around $850,000, maybe $900,000 with the new pool. They are living in my $900,000 house, I said. Rent-free? Yes, Grant said. And since there is no lease, I said, looking at him, I can ask them to leave. Grant's face didn't change, but his eyes glinted. In Colorado, removing a family member who has established residency is complicated. You have to follow the eviction process, notice to quit, court dates. It takes time. I don't need to evict them tomorrow, I said. I felt a cold smile touching my lips. It felt strange, foreign, but powerful. I just need them to know that I can... That, Grant said, closing the red folder, is what we call leverage. They think I am helpless, I said, the anger finally cooling into something usable, a weapon. Dad told me on the phone that I should be grateful, that I need them, that I have nowhere to go. He was wrong, Grant said. He was very wrong, I agreed. I don't need to go anywhere. I can go home, to my house in Fort Collins. Grant nodded slowly. So, what is the play? Lily? Do we file the fraud charges for the condo now? Do we send the sheriff to the wedding? I thought about it. I thought about the police dragging my father away in handcuffs. It would be satisfying, yes, but it would be messy. It would make me look like the hysterical daughter ruining the special day. Brielle would spin it. Mom would cry. The narrative would be that I was vindictive. No, I didn't want a scene that they could twist. I wanted a scene that they couldn't escape. I wanted them to stand on a stage, surrounded by everyone they tried to impress, and realize that the floor they were standing on was actually a trapdoor that I controlled. No sheriff, I said. Not yet. Okay, Grant said. Then what? I want you to prepare the eviction notice, I said, and a demand for back rent for the last 14 years. Calculate the fair market value. With interest. Grant raised an eyebrow. That will be hundreds of thousands of dollars. They won't be able to pay it. I know, I said. That is the point. And the condo fraud? Prepare the civil suit, I said, but don't file it yet. I want everything ready. I want the paperwork for the condo theft in one hand, and the paperwork for the Fort Collins house in the other. And when do we deploy this? Grant asked. I looked at the date on my phone. The wedding was in 48 hours. My father said something to me, I murmured. He said, family doesn't sue family. He thinks that rule protects him. I looked at Grant. He is about to find out that the rule works both ways. If I am the landlord, then he is just a tenant who hasn't paid his bills. I will have the papers drafted by morning, Grant said, standing up and picking up his briefcase. You should get some sleep. Lily, you have a big weekend ahead of you. Grant? I called out as he reached the door. He turned back. Thank you, I said. For looking? I hate bullies, Grant said simply, especially the ones who share your last name. He walked out. Leaving me alone in the quiet hum of the hospital room, I reached for my phone again. There was a new text from Brielle. Brielle. Mom said you were super dramatic on the phone. Don't be a vibe killer. Lily, just get better so you can see me in my dress. It costs $12,000. I stared at the number. $12,000. That was 3 months of my mortgage payments on the condo. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I placed the phone on the table next to the red folder. They sold my house to pay for a wedding. But they forgot one crucial detail. You should never burn bridges with the person who owns the roof over your head. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since waking up, I didn't feel pain. I felt patience. I would wait. I would heal. And then I would go to the wedding, and I would bring the house down. Panic is a luxury for people who have safety nets. Rage is a fuel, but it burns out if you don't have an engine to put it in. I lay in that hospital bed, the red folder heavy on my lap, and I realized I didn't want to just be angry. I wanted to be effective. The room had turned into a war room. The nurse, a different one this time, had come in to check my vitals and found me surrounded by papers. My phone plugged into the wall like a life support system. She had given me a look that said, "You should be sleeping." But she didn't stop me. Maybe she saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a patient. It was the look of a prosecutor. "Grant," I said, my voice steady despite the dry scratchiness of my throat. "I need a timeline, not a wish list, a tactical timeline." Grant Calder was sitting in the visitor chair, his laptop open on his knees. He was typing furiously. He stopped and looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "We have 2 tracks," he said, holding up 2 fingers. "Track 1 is the scorched earth policy, criminal charges. We file a report with the FBI and the local district attorney regarding wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Since the amount is over $100,000 and it crossed state lines via wire transfer, this is federal territory." "And the consequences?" I asked. "Your parents go to jail," Grant said bluntly. "This isn't a slap on the wrist. This is 5 to 10 years, maybe more if the judge is in a bad mood. And the money? It gets frozen as evidence. You might not see a dime of restitution for years. I stared at the ceiling tile with the water stain. Jail. I imagined my mother in an orange jumpsuit. It seemed absurd. My mother, who panicked if her thread count wasn't high enough. In prison? It felt like a bad movie. I don't want them in jail, I said slowly. Not yet. If I arrest them now, before the wedding, I become the villain. I become the ungrateful daughter who ruined Brielle's big day over money. They will spin it. They will say it was a misunderstanding, that I am hysterical from the drugs. The family will rally around them. So, track 2, Grant said, tapping a key. Civil litigation. We sue for conversion, fraud, and unjust enrichment. We file a lis pendens on the condo to cloud the title, essentially freezing the sale and scaring the hell out of the buyer. And we serve them with the lawsuit. Better, I said, but still too slow. A lawsuit is just paper. My parents don't respect paper. They ignore bills. They ignore notices. They think paper is for other people. I sat up a little straighter, ignoring the protest of my fused spine. I need a third track, I said. I need public exposure. I need them to admit it. I need the family, all those aunts and uncles and cousins who think my parents are saints, to see the receipts. I need to strip them of the one thing they value more than money. Their reputation, Grant finished. Exactly, I said. I want to catch them in the lie. If I sue them quietly, they will settle quietly or drag it out. If I arrest them, they play the victim. But if I expose them, if I show everyone who they really are, that is a sentence they can't appeal. Grant looked at me with a mixture of concern and professional admiration. That is high risk, Lily. You are talking about a confrontation at a wedding, alcohol, emotions, microphones. It could get messy. It is already messy, I said. They made it messy when they sold my house while I was unconscious. I am just bringing the mop. I reached for my phone. I need a witness. Someone inside the family who isn't drinking the Kool-Aid. Someone who can hold the evidence so my parents can't snatch it out of my hands. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name. Aunt Marla. Marla was my mother's older sister. She was everything my mother was not, where my mother was soft, vague, and manipulative. Marla was sharp, loud, and brutally honest. She had spent 40 years working as a paralegal and office manager for a high-volume divorce firm in Chicago before retiring to Santa Fe. She knew the law. She knew bullshit when she smelled it. And most importantly, she had never liked my father. I hit dial. It is 2 a.m. Lily. Marla's voice rasped in my ear. She sounded like she had been asleep, but she was alert instantly. Are you okay? Is the surgery over? Did something break? I am alive, I said. But I need you. Are you still coming to the wedding? Unfortunately, Marla grunted. I have a non-refundable ticket. Why? Do you need a ride from the hospital? I need a bodyguard, I said, and a paralegal. I told her everything. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her about the voicemail, the $425,000, the forged signature, the house in Fort Collins that I apparently owned. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. For a terrifying moment. I thought she was going to tell me to calm down. I thought she was going to tell me to forgive them. Then, I heard the sound of a cigarette lighter clicking. That son of a bitch, Marla exhaled, the smoke practically traveling through the phone line. I knew Warren was a snake, but I didn't think he had the balls to eat his own young. And Kendra, God, she went along with it? She signed the papers. Marla, I said. She was the one who texted me to ask when the anesthesia would kick in. Jesus, Marla muttered. That is cold. That is reptilian. I have a plan, I said, but I can't do it alone. I am on pain meds. I can barely walk. If I go into that wedding and try to confront them, they will gaslight me. They will say I'm crazy. They will take the microphone away. Not if I am standing next to you, Marla said. Her voice had shifted. It was no longer the voice of a sleepy aunt. It was the voice of a woman who had prepared thousands of divorce filings. "What do you need me to do?" "I am going to email you a file," I said. "It contains every screenshot, every document, every recording. I need you to print 3 copies. One for you, one for me, and one for the groom." "For Logan?" Marla asked. "He is a finance guy," I said. "He understands numbers. If he sees the fraud, he won't marry into this mess. Or at least, he deserves to know what he is buying into." "Smart," Marla said. "Hit them where the money lives. I will be at the hospital tomorrow morning. We will go over the game plan. And Lily?" "Yeah." "Don't let them see you coming. Wear beige. Look tired. Let them think they won." "That is the plan," I said. "Good girl. See you at dawn." I hung up and looked at Grant. "We have a team," Grant nodded, typing something into his laptop. "Okay. If we are doing this live, we need to be precise. You can't just ramble. You lose the audience after 30 seconds. You need a script." "I am not an actress," I said. "No, you are a plaintiff," Grant corrected. "And the wedding guests are the jury. You need to make your case before the defense attorney, your father, objects." He turned the laptop screen toward me. "I call this the 90-second indictment," Grant said. "It is everything you need to say to establish the facts, prove the fraud, and drop the bomb about the other house. 90 seconds. That is about as long as you will have before someone tries to physically remove the microphone from your hand." I read the text on the screen. It was brutal in its efficiency. No emotional appeals. No, "How could you do this to me?" Just dates, amounts, and legal definitions. "It is perfect," I said. "We need to condense the paperwork too," Grant said. "You can't wave a 50-page closing disclosure in the air. No one can read that from a dinner table. We need a summary sheet, 1 page, big font, the highlight reel of the theft." "Do it," I said. For the next hour, we worked. Grant drafted the summary. I organized the digital evidence. I created a folder on my phone named The Project. Inside, I sorted the files chronologically. Exhibit A, the text message asking for the deed. Exhibit B, the voicemail confirming the sale. Exhibit C, the forged signature side by side with my real one. Exhibit D, the warranty deed for the Fort Collins house. It was a digital knife, sharpened to a razor edge. "Grant," I said, as he packed up his printer. He actually had a portable printer in his briefcase, which I found equal parts ridiculous and heroic. "I need to practice." "Practice what?" "The speech," I said. "If I get up there and start crying, I lose. If my voice shakes, they will say I am unstable. I need to deliver this like I am reading the weather report." Grant handed me the printed script. "Go to the bathroom mirror. Look yourself in the eye. Say it until the words don't taste like poison anymore. Say it until they just taste like facts." I pushed the blanket off my legs. The pain in my back flared, a hot, stabbing reminder of the titanium rods now holding me together. I gritted my teeth and swung my legs over the side of the bed. "Do you need help?" Grant asked, half rising. "No," I said, grabbing the IV pole. "I need to stand on my own 2 feet, literally." I shuffled to the small bathroom attached to the recovery room. The fluorescent light was unflattering. I looked like a ghost. My skin was gray, my eyes were sunken, and my hair was a matted disaster. I looked at my reflection. This was the face of the daughter they thought they could discard. I held the paper up. "My name is Lily Berry," I whispered. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. I looked at the dark circles under my eyes. "My name is Lily Berry," I said, louder this time. "6 weeks ago, I scheduled a surgery." I read through the script. I stumbled over the numbers. I let a sob catch in my throat when I got to the part about the wedding budget. "No," I slapped the counter with my free hand. The sting helped center me. Do not cry for people who do not cry for you. I started again. "My parents sold my condo for $425,000. I said it again. $425,000. I said it until the number was just a collection of syllables. I said it until it didn't hurt. I said it until it sounded like an accusation. I practiced the pause, the moment where I would look at Brielle, the moment where I would turn to my father. By the time I came out of the bathroom, I was sweating, and my back was screaming, but my voice was ice. "You are scary when you are calm," Grant noted, watching me climb back into the bed. "Good," I said. "I am going to need to be terrifying." Grant packed up his briefcase. The sky outside the window was beginning to turn a bruised purple. Dawn was coming. The wedding was tomorrow. "One last thing," Grant said, pausing at the door. "The notice for the Fort Collins house. The eviction warning. Do you want me to mail it?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "Draft it. Make it official. Put it on your letterhead, but do not mail it." I picked up my phone and opened my messages. I typed a text to Grant, even though he was standing right there, because I wanted it in writing. I wanted the timestamp. "Prepare the notice to quit for 742 Maple Ridge Drive. Have it ready to file, but do not send it yet. I will give the signal." "I will wait for your command," Grant said. "Get some sleep. Lily, you have to be strong enough to walk onto that stage." "I won't just walk," I said, looking at the red folder on my nightstand. "I am going to march." Grant left. The room fell silent again, save for the rhythmic beep of the monitor. I didn't sleep. I lay there, visualizing the wedding reception. I pictured the round tables, the white tablecloths, the expensive centerpieces paid for with my retirement fund. I pictured my father holding the microphone, his face flushed with wine and self-importance. I pictured my mother, smiling her tight, anxious smile. They were expecting a toast. They were expecting me to be the good daughter, the prop, the quiet background character who absorbed their sins so they could shine. They were going to drag me onto that stage to show everyone that we were a happy, united family. They were going to use me to validate their theft. "Come on up, Lily. Say a few words." I smiled in the darkness. It wasn't a nice smile. "Okay, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "I'll say a few words." I reached for the button to dim the lights. My hand brushed against the cool plastic of the folder. The heist was planned. The team was assembled. The weapons were loaded. Now, all I had to do was wait for them to hand me the microphone. If you want to know how a crime gets covered up in the 21st century, you do not look at police reports. You look at Instagram. I was lying in my hospital bed, propped up by pillows that felt like bags of cement, scrolling through the feed that was systematically assassinating my character. My sister, Brielle, was not just a bride. She was a content creator of her own victimization. 10 minutes ago, she had posted a story. It was a black and white selfie, close up, showing a single, perfectly lit tear tracking down her cheek. The caption was written in that spindly, elegant font that influencers use when they want to seem vulnerable but aesthetic. Some people can't handle seeing others shine. It breaks my heart when jealousy tears a family apart right before the biggest day of my life. Please send good vibes. The devil works hard, but my anxiety works harder. There were no names mentioned. That was Brielle's genius. She never named names. She just left a trail of breadcrumbs so obvious that a pigeon with a concussion could follow them straight to my door. I watched the replies roll in. They popped up on my screen like little bubbles of toxic positivity. "Stay strong. Queen, don't let the haters win. Family can be so toxic. Focus on your love story. Is this about your sister? I heard she didn't even come to the dress fitting. So selfish." I took a screenshot. Then came the direct messages to me. My phone buzzed against my leg, vibrating with the collective judgment of the Barry extended family. First was Aunt Linda, my father's sister, who lived in Ohio and hadn't spoken to me since Christmas 2 years ago. "Lily, I know you are in pain from the surgery, but please think about your mother." She sounded frantic on the phone. "You are upsetting the bride. Just let them have this weekend. You can talk about money later." Then cousin Sarah, who I knew for a fact had borrowed $500 from Brielle last year and never paid it back. Why are you being such a drama queen? It's just a house. You have a good job. Brielle needs this. Be the bigger person for once. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't defend myself. I didn't type out paragraphs explaining that it wasn't just a house. It was grand larceny. I learned a long time ago that you cannot explain algebra to people who do not believe in numbers. They didn't want the truth. They wanted the wedding. They wanted the open bar and the pretty pictures. I was just the speed bump on the way to the party. I opened a new folder in my gallery and named it The Smear Campaign. But Brielle, in her desperation to control the narrative, was making a tactical error. She was oversharing. She was posting sneak peeks of the wedding details to prove how worth it the stress was. She posted a video of the floral arrangements, so obsessed with these peonies. We had to fly them in from Holland because the local ones just weren't giving the right vibe. $15,000 for petals. But look at that pink. I checked the bank records Grant had sent me. There was a wire transfer for $15,000 to Lux Blooms International dated yesterday. Next was a photo of a wine bottle. Only the best for our guests. Vintage Dom. $500 a pop. We cleared out the cellar. I checked the records. A charge for $12,000 at the Vintner's Reserve. I didn't argue. I archived. After screenshot, timestamps, names, and receipts. She was literally posting the receipts of her theft. She was taking the money she had stolen from my equity and parading it on the internet as a status symbol. She thought she was flexing. I saw it as a confession. The door to my hospital room swung open. The air in the room changed instantly. It went from the sterile smell of antiseptic to the cloying, expensive scent of Chanel No. 5 and stress sweat. "There she is," my father announced, his voice booming with a fake joviality that made my teeth ache. "The patient lives." They filed in like a delegation from a foreign country that I was currently at war with. Dad was wearing his golf polo, looking flushed and hearty. Mom was in a beige silk blouse that probably cost more than my health insurance deductible, clutching her purse like a shield, and behind them, trailing like a reluctant prisoner, was Logan. I hadn't seen Logan in 6 months. Brielle's fiancé was a quiet man, a stark contrast to the loud, performative chaos of my family. He worked in high-level wealth management for a firm in Denver. He came from old money, the kind of family that had buildings named after them and considered talking about cash to be vulgar. He was decent, polite, and, up until now, completely blind to the viper's nest he was marrying into. "Hi, Lily," Logan said, offering a small, tight smile. He looked exhausted. He was holding a potted orchid that looked like it had been bought in the hospital gift shop 5 minutes ago. "Hi, Logan," I said. My voice was raspy, but I didn't clear it. I wanted them to hear the damage. "Oh, look at you," Mom sighed, rushing to the side of the bed but stopping short of actually touching me. She looked at the IV line in my arm with a grimace of distaste. You look tired, but the doctor said the surgery went perfectly, so that is good news." "The surgery was fine," I said, staring at her. "The recovery has been interesting." Mom's eyes darted away. She began rearranging the items on my bedside table, moving my water cup, straightening the red folder that contained the evidence of her crime. She didn't open it. She just moved it, as if tidying up the surface would tidy up the reality. "We can't stay long," Dad said, checking his watch. "We have the rehearsal dinner in Santa Fe tonight. Big drive. But we wanted to bring you some soup." He placed a plastic container on the rolling table. It was cold. It looked like takeout from a deli. "Thanks," I said. "Did you pay for it with my money, or did you use your own for once?" The room went dead silent. The beep of the heart monitor seemed to get louder. "Lily," Mom hissed, her face crumbling into that familiar, pained expression she used to control us. "Don't start. Not in front of Logan." "Start what?" I asked, widening my eyes innocently. "I am just asking a financial question. Since you guys are managing my assets now." "You are being incredibly unfair," Mom said, her voice wobbling. Tears, real or manufactured, I could never tell, welled up in her eyes. Do you have any idea how much stress I am under? I have been coordinating vendors for 3 days straight. My blood pressure is through the roof, and now I have to come here and be attacked by my own daughter? Are you trying to kill me, Lily? Is that it? You want me to have a stroke before the wedding? It was a classic performance. The Darvo maneuver: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. She was the victim now. I was the ungrateful aggressor causing her medical distress. I don't want you to have a stroke, Mom, I said calmly. I just want you to answer one question. I leaned forward, ignoring the pull of the stitches in my back. Did you sign my name on the closing documents? Mom froze. She looked at Dad. Dad looked at the wall. We handled the business, Mom said, her voice tight. We did what parents do. We took care of things when you couldn't. Did you sign my name? I repeated. I enunciated every word like I was teaching a toddler to speak. Stop interrogating your mother, Dad snapped. Stepping forward, his face was red. This is exactly why we didn't tell you beforehand. You get obsessive. You get rigid. You care more about paperwork than people. I care about the law, I said. I looked past them to Logan. He was standing near the door, clutching the orchid. He hadn't said a word, but he was watching. He was looking at Dad's red face. He was looking at Mom's evasive eyes, and then he looked at me. Logan was a numbers guy. He dealt in risk assessment. He knew what a liar looked like. He dealt with people trying to hide assets and fudge ledgers every day. I saw the question form in his eyes. He looked at the tension in the room, and the math wasn't adding up. Why was the family so defensive? Why was the daughter with the broken spine being treated like the villain? Logan, I said softly. He jumped a little. Yeah, Lily? It is going to be a beautiful wedding, I said. Brielle has excellent taste, very expensive taste. Logan shifted his weight. Yeah, it certainly added up fast. The budget kind of expanded at the last minute. Funny how that happens, I said. Liquidity can be so hard to find. Dad stepped between me and Logan, physically blocking my line of sight. Okay, that is enough, Dad said. We are leaving. We have a 3-hour drive. Lily, you get some rest. Fix your attitude before you come to the wedding tomorrow. I don't want any long faces in the photos. Oh, I'll be there, I promised. I wouldn't miss it. Come on, Logan, Mom said, grabbing the poor guy's arm and practically dragging him toward the door. We are going to be late for the lighting check. They bustled out, a whirlwind of nervous energy and denial. But Logan paused at the door, just for a second. He looked back at me. His brow was furrowed. He looked like a man who had just heard a floorboard creak in a house that was supposed to be empty. I held his gaze. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just let him see the cold, hard resolve in my face. Then he was gone. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were shaking again. I picked up my phone. Brielle hadn't come in. She was probably in the car, protecting her vibe, afraid that seeing me in a hospital gown would ruin her aesthetic. She had posted another story 5 minutes ago. A picture of the open road, taken from the passenger seat of her car. Road trip to Santa Fe. Leaving the negativity behind. Next stop, happily ever after. I opened our text thread. The last message from her was 3 weeks ago, asking if I had a strapless bra she could borrow. I typed, I saw your post about the jealous relatives. I paused. I deleted it. Too emotional. I typed again. I hope you enjoy the drive. I hope the flowers are worth $15,000. Deleted. Too specific. It would tip my hand. I needed something that would haunt her. Something that would sit in the back of her mind like a splinter while she was rehearsing her vows. I needed her to know that the silence from my end wasn't submission. It was the calm before the artillery barrage. I typed a single sentence. I have a wedding gift for you. You will see it on the day. Send. I watched the status change to delivered, then read. The 3 little dots of typing appeared immediately. She was going to fire back. She was going to call me a bitch. She was going to tell me to stay home. Then the dots disappeared. She didn't reply. She was scared. She knew, deep down, under the layers of denial and entitlement. She knew what she had done. She knew whose money was paying for that champagne. And she knew that I was the one person in the world who knew the code to the safe. I put the phone down and looked at the red folder. The jealous relative wasn't going to ruin the wedding. The rightful owner was just coming to collect the rent. I called the nurse. "I need to get up," I said when she arrived. "Honey, you just walked an hour ago," she warned. "I need to walk again," I said, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. The pain tore through my lower back, white-hot and blinding. I grit my teeth until my jaw popped. "I need to be able to stand for 90 seconds tomorrow without holding onto a podium." "You're pushing it," the nurse said, though she moved to support my elbow. "What is so important about 90 seconds? "It is the length of a toast," I said, forcing myself to stand upright, trembling but vertical. "And I have a really important speech to give." I took a step, then another. Brielle wanted a show? I would give her a show, but the price of admission was going to be higher than she ever imagined. The drive to Santa Fe took 4 hours, and every single mile felt like a personal insult to my lumbar vertebrae. By the time Marla pulled her sedan into the valet circle of the restaurant, my pain level was hovering somewhere around an 8 out of 10, but I adjusted my dress, checked my lipstick in the visor mirror, and swallowed the scream sitting in my throat. I wasn't here to be comfortable. I was here to be a ghost at the feast. The venue was called the Adobe Rose, or something equally pretentious and Southwest chic. It was the kind of place where the walls were made of authentic clay. The lighting was so dim you needed a flashlight to read the menu, and the air smelled of burning pinon wood and expensive cologne. It was exactly the sort of place Brielle would choose to prove she had arrived, paid for with money she had never earned. I was late, deliberately late. Marla offered me her arm, but I shook my head. I reached into the back seat and pulled out the cane I had bought at a pharmacy on the way out of town. It was black, aluminum, and ugly. It clashed violently with the beige silk dress I was wearing, the one Marla had advised me to wear because it made me look washed out and harmless. "Ready?" Marla asked, lighting a cigarette she intended to smoke in 10 seconds flat before we went inside. "Showtime," I said. We walked to the heavy wooden doors. The hostess tried to stop us to check the list, but Marla just breezed past her with the confidence of a woman who had served subpoenas to senators. We entered the private dining room. It was a long, narrow space with a vaulted ceiling. A single, massive table ran down the center, set for 40 people. Crystal glasses sparkled under the iron chandeliers. The low murmur of conversation was punctuated by the sharp clink of silver forks hitting porcelain. I took a step. Tap, tap. The rubber tip of my cane hit the saltillo tile floor. Thwack. The sound cut through the ambient noise like a gunshot. Heads turned. The conversation died, starting from the end of the table nearest to the door and rippling all the way to the head, where my father sat like a king holding court. I didn't speed up. I couldn't speed up. I walked with a slow, rhythmic limp that forced everyone to watch every agonizing step. I saw their faces change, pity, confusion. And in the case of my immediate family, pure, unadulterated panic. They had bet on me staying in the hospital. They had banked on the morphine keeping me docile and horizontal. Seeing me standing there, vertical and armed with a cane, was like seeing a corpse walk out of the morgue. "Lily!" It was my mother, Kendra. She stood up so fast her chair screeched against the tile. Her smile was a rictus of terror, plastered on for the benefit of the extended family and Logan's wealthy parents. We didn't think you could make it," she announced, her voice an octave too high. "Oh, look at you. You poor thing. You should be resting." She rushed toward me, arms open, clearly intending to intercept me before I could reach the center of the room. It was a containment maneuver. I didn't hug her back. I let her wrap her arms around me, feeling the stiffness in her body. She smelled of wine and desperation. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, loud enough for the table to hear. I wanted to see what the budget paid for. Mom pulled back, her fingernails digging into my bicep. Her smile stayed fixed, but her eyes were lethal. "Sit down," she hissed through her teeth, "and shut up." A waiter, sensing the tension but misreading it as concern for an invalid, hurriedly pulled out a chair for me. It was at the far end of the table, near the kitchen door. The exile seat. Perfect. I sat down slowly, wincing as my back adjusted to the hard wood. Marla sat next to me. She didn't say a word. She just opened her purse, took out a pack of gum, and placed it on the table like a weapon. Her eyes began to scan the room, moving from face to face, cataloging reactions. She was counting votes. She was identifying the jurors. The room remained awkwardly silent for a moment too long. My father, realizing he was losing control of the vibe, tapped his spoon against his wine glass. Ding, ding, ding. "All right, everyone," Warren said, standing up. He held a glass of dark red wine, Cabernet, probably $40 a glass. "Let's not let the emotion of the moment overwhelm us. It is a miracle that Lily could join us, a testament to the Barry resilience." There was a scattering of polite applause. Logan's mother, a woman dripping in turquoise jewelry, looked at me with genuine sympathy. She didn't know she was looking at the woman whose stolen identity was paying for her dinner. "I want to propose a toast," Dad continued. He puffed out his chest. He loved this part. He loved being the patriarch. "To Brielle and Logan, and to family. You know, people talk about family like it is just biology, but it isn't. Family is sacrifice." I picked up my water glass. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of not throwing it at his head. "Family is about doing the hard things," Dad droned on, his voice dropping to a register he thought sounded wise. "It is about pooling our resources. It is about lifting each other up. Sometimes, one of us has to carry the load so the other can fly. That is love. That is what makes us strong." He paused for dramatic effect, and then he did it. He looked at me. It wasn't a warm look. It was a stare, a challenge. His eyes bored into mine across the length of the table, over the centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus. He was telling me, right there in front of everyone, that my loss was his victory. He was daring me to speak. He was asserting his dominance, reminding me that he was the father, and I was just the resource he had harvested. "See?" His eyes said. "I took it, and you are sitting there drinking water. I win." I held his gaze. I didn't blink. I raised my glass of water in a mock salute, took a sip, and set it down with a deliberate click. "Not yet, old man." I thought, not yet. "To Brielle and Logan," Dad bellowed. "To Brielle and Logan." The room echoed. The tension broke, and the clatter of silverware resumed. Waiters swarmed out with appetizers, seared scallops with saffron foam. I looked at the scallop. It probably cost $12. I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Bathroom," Mom whispered in my ear. "Now." It wasn't a request. I wiped my mouth with the linen napkin. "Help me up. Marla." Marla stood and helped me hoist myself upright. I grabbed my cane. Mom was already marching toward the hallway that led to the restrooms, her heels clicking angrily. I followed at my own pace, let her wait. When I entered the women's restroom, she checked under the stalls to make sure we were alone. Then she turned on me, her face contorted with a fury that made her look 10 years older. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "I was invited," I said, leaning against the sink to take the weight off my spine. "I am the sister of the bride." "You are here to cause trouble," she spat. "I saw the way you looked at your father. I saw that little performance with the cane. You are milking it. Lily, you are trying to make us look like monsters." "I don't have to try." "Mom," I said, "you guys are doing a great job on your own." She stepped close to me, invading my personal space. I could smell the expensive wine on her breath. "Listen to me," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Tomorrow is the most important day of your sister's life. We have spent months planning this. We have spent a fortune. My fortune, I corrected. Our fortune, she snapped. It is family money. And if you do anything, to ruin tomorrow, if you make a scene, if you cry, if you tell anyone your little sob story about the condo, you are done. Do you understand? You don't call me Mom anymore. You don't come for Christmas. You are cut off, dead to us. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, and I realized, with a sudden, liberating clarity, that I didn't care. The threat held no weight because the bond was already severed. She had severed it when she signed my name on that deed. Is that a promise? I asked softly. She blinked, confused by my lack of fear. What? If I speak, I am free of you? I asked. I never have to lend you money again? I never have to listen to you compare me to Brielle? I never have to be the retirement plan you forgot to save for? You are being insane, she muttered, backing away. You are high on painkillers. Maybe, I said, or maybe I am just finally sober. She glared at me one last time in the mirror, fixing a stray hair. Just behave. For once in your life, Lily, be the daughter we need you to be. She stormed out. I stayed in the bathroom for a moment, listening to the hum of the ventilation fan. I washed my hands. I looked at my reflection. I will be exactly the daughter you raised, I whispered to the mirror. You taught me to pay my debts, so I'm going to make sure everyone pays theirs. When I walked back into the dining room, the main course was being served. Filet mignon. Brielle was making the rounds, floating from chair to chair in a white cocktail dress, accepting compliments like a deity, accepting offerings. She saw me and glided over. She didn't look concerned about my back. She looked annoyed that my cane was taking up floor space. You're here, she said flatly. I'm here, I said. She leaned down, putting her face close to mine so it looked like we were sharing a tender sisterly moment. From a distance, it looked sweet. Up close, her eyes were cold. Mom said you are being a bitch, Brielle whispered, smiling broadly for the benefit of the photographer who was snapping candids across the room. Mom says a lot of things, I said. Like, Lily is in surgery. Sign the papers. Brielle's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered. She patted my shoulder. Look, Lily, she murmured. I know you are jealous. I get it. You are single. You live in that tiny apartment, and I am getting all this. But don't ruin it for me. If you just stay quiet and play nice, people will still respect you. You can be the brave older sister. It is a good look for you. Don't embarrass yourself by trying to make this about you. You think this is about jealousy? I asked, looking at her diamond earrings. Isn't it always? She smirked. You have always wanted what I have. No, Brielle, I said. I have never wanted what you have. I just wanted to keep what I earned. She rolled her eyes. God, you are so boring about money. It is just paper. Lily, get over it. She straightened up, flashed a dazzling smile at the room, and walked away to hug a cousin. Just paper. I looked down at my steak. I wasn't hungry. I felt eyes on me. I turned my head. Logan was standing near the bar, holding a tumbler of scotch. He wasn't looking at his bride. He was looking at me. His expression was troubled. He had seen the interaction with Mom. He had seen the interaction with Brielle. He was putting the pieces together. He walked over. He didn't sit. He just stood near my chair, pretending to watch the room. You okay, Lily? He asked quietly. I have been better. Logan, I said. Your dad gave a nice speech, he said, testing the waters. It was very thematic, I replied. Logan swirled his ice. There is something weird going on. Your mom is acting like she is defusing a bomb. And Brielle? She keeps checking her phone like she is expecting bad news. Is there something I should know? I looked up at him. He was a good guy. He was weak. Maybe, for putting up with Brielle's high-maintenance demands. But he wasn't malicious. He didn't deserve to be collateral damage, but he was about to be. Logan, I said. Do you love her? He blinked. Of course. Do you trust her? He hesitated, just for a second, but that second was everything. I want to, he said. If you want to know the truth, I said, my voice low and steady. If you really want to know what bought this steak and paid for that band, don't ask me now. Wait. Wait for what? He asked. Wait until my dad hands me the microphone tomorrow, I said. Listen to what I say, and then decide if you still want to sign that marriage license. Logan stared at me. He looked pale. Lily, that sounds ominous. It is honest, I said. And honesty is the one thing you are not getting from anyone else in this room. He opened his mouth to ask more, but Brielle appeared out of nowhere, looping her arm through his. Baby, she squealed. Come meet Uncle Jerry. He wants to talk about stocks. She dragged him away. Logan looked back at me over his shoulder, his eyes wide with alarm. He knew. He didn't know the specifics, but he knew the storm was coming. I checked my watch. 8:30. I had been here for an hour. That was enough. I had made my appearance. I had unsettled the enemy. I had planted the seed of doubt in the groom. Marla, I said, get the car. Marla nodded. She stood up, brushed crumbs off her lap, and offered me her hand. We made our exit. We didn't say goodbye. We just started the slow, painful procession back to the door. The room went quiet again as we moved. My cane tapped out a rhythm of departure. As we reached the heavy wooden doors, Dad called out, Leaving so soon? Lily, we haven't even cut the groom's cake. I stopped. I turned around slowly. The entire room was watching. I need to rest. Dad, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. I have a big performance tomorrow. Performance? He laughed nervously. It is just a toast, honey, I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all night. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Tomorrow, I said, looking from him to Mom to Brielle. You will get exactly what you want, a moment no one forgets. I pushed the doors open and walked out into the cool desert night. We got into the car. Marla started the engine. You scared the hell out of them, Marla said, lighting a cigarette. Your mother looked like she was going to vomit. Good, I said, leaning my head back against the seat. Let them sweat. They handle stress poorly. They make mistakes when they are scared. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out. It was a message from Grant Calder. I read it, and a chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. Grant. Lily, I found something on the notary who stamped the deed transfer. His name is Arthur Pren. He isn't just a friend of your dad's. He has 2 prior complaints filed against him for improper notarization involving elder abuse cases. He never lost his license, but he is on thin ice. I typed back, What does that mean for us? The reply came instantly. Grant, it means this isn't just a civil dispute about a family squabble. If we can prove he knew you weren't there, which we can, because you were in a hospital bed, it establishes a pattern of racketeering. It makes the transaction void ab initio, void from the beginning, but more importantly, it makes this a scandal that the local news would love. Local notary helps family rob disabled daughter. If this gets out, your parents aren't just losing face, they are losing their social standing in the entire state. I lowered the phone. I looked out the window at the passing lights of Santa Fe. My parents were worried about a wedding scandal. They had no idea they were sitting on top of a criminal enterprise that was about to blow up in the morning papers. Marla, I said. Yeah? Drive faster, I said. I need to get some sleep. I have a feeling I'm going to need a lot of energy to burn a dynasty to the ground. You might wonder why I walked into that rehearsal dinner with the swagger of a woman holding a royal flush. You might wonder why I wasn't terrified of my father's booming voice or my mother's death glare. The answer is simple. I wasn't walking in there hoping for an apology. I was walking in there knowing that I had already won. The victory hadn't happened at the dinner. It had happened 48 hours earlier, in a quiet, sun-drenched coffee shop where my parents had set a trap, and walked right into mine instead. 2 days before the wedding. My phone had buzzed. It was my mother. "Can we meet for coffee?" "Just the three of us. Dad wants to clear the air before the big weekend. We want to make things right." I showed the text to Grant. He was sitting in my temporary living room, also known as Aunt Marla's guest suite, surrounded by stacks of files. "It is a setup," Grant said, not even looking up from his laptop. "They are scared. They know the paperwork for the condo sale was sloppy. They need you to validate it retroactively." "So I should go?" I asked. "Absolutely," Grant smiled. "But you are not going alone. You are taking a silent partner." He slid a small, flat device across the table, a digital voice recorder. "Colorado is a one-party consent state," Grant reminded me. "As long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it, get them talking, get them to admit they signed for you." I met them at a bistro downtown. They were already seated in a corner booth, looking like the picture of concerned, loving parents. Mom ordered me a latte before I even sat down. Dad was smiling, but his eyes were darting around the room, checking for eavesdroppers. "Lily, honey," Mom started, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back to pick up my cup. "We are so glad you came. We hate this tension. We really do. We just want everyone to be happy," Dad added. "This wedding is huge for your sister. We want you to be part of it. Fully." "I am listening," I said. Dad cleared his throat and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. He slid it across the table like a blackjack dealer sliding a card. "We spoke to the accountant," Dad said casually. "And he mentioned that since we handled the condo sale while you were indisposed, it would be cleaner for tax purposes if we had a little confirmation from you. Just a formality. To make sure the IRS doesn't get confused about the funds." I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a tax document. It was a ratification of agency. The legal language was dense, but I had spent the last 3 nights reading real estate law. The document essentially stated that I, Lily Berry, acknowledged that my parents acted as my authorized agents in the sale of the property and that I retroactively approved all their actions, including the disbursement of funds. If I signed this, the fraud charges would vanish. The theft would become a gift. I would be signing away $425,000 and giving them a get-out-of-jail-free card. "It is just standard stuff," Mom said, watching my face intently. "Just acknowledging that we helped you out." "Help me out?" I looked up. "By selling my home?" "By liquidating an asset to help the family," Dad corrected, his voice hardening slightly. "Look, Lily, we know you are upset, but what is done is done. The money is spent. If you don't sign this, it just creates a mess for everyone. The title company might hold up the closing. The new owners might get hassled. You don't want to hurt innocent people, do you?" I pulled my phone out. "I need to send a picture of this to my lawyer," I said. The reaction was instantaneous. "No!" Dad slammed his hand down on the table. Coffee sloshed over the rim of my cup. "No lawyers. This is a family matter." "If it is just a formality, why can't a lawyer see it?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Because lawyers complicate things," Mom cried out. "They charge fees. They twist words. Lily, why can't you just trust us? We are your parents." "I am not signing anything I haven't read properly," I said. I raised my phone and snapped a photo of the document before Dad could snatch it away. He lunged for the paper, grabbing it and shoving it back into his pocket. His face was a mask of red fury. The nice dad act was gone. "You are being a brat," he hissed. "You are awake now. You are fine. The surgery worked. So why do you have to be so difficult? We signed the papers because you were unconscious. We did you a favor. Now just sign the damn ratification so we can move on." Gotcha. I felt the weight of the recorder in my pocket. "You admit you signed it because I was unconscious?" I asked, looking him in the eye. "You admit I didn't give you permission?" "You couldn't give permission," Dad snapped. "You were under anesthesia. We made an executive decision. Now stop playing games and sign the paper, or so help me God. Lily. Or what? I asked. Or you will be the reason this family breaks apart. Mom sobbed. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason Brielle cries on her wedding day? I stood up. My back screamed in protest. But I ignored it. I am not signing, I said, and I am not leaving. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving them sitting there with their unsigned get-out-of-jail card. Back at Aunt Marla's, Grant listened to the recording. He sat back in his chair, a rare smile playing on his lips. That is it, he said. He admits knowledge. He admits intent. He admits you were incapacitated. You were under anesthesia. We made an executive decision. That is a confession to wire fraud and forgery, recorded in high definition. So we can arrest them? Marla asked from the kitchen, where she was making a pot of tea. We could, Grant said. We could call the FBI right now. They would probably pick them up before the rehearsal dinner. He looked at me. Is that what you want? Lily? Do you want them in handcuffs tonight? I thought about it. I thought about the satisfaction of seeing the police cars pull up to their house, but then I thought about the narrative. If they were arrested tonight, the wedding would be canceled. Brielle would be the tragic victim of a police misunderstanding. My parents would be martyrs. The extended family would blame me for ruining the weekend. The truth about the money, the specific, cold, hard numbers of their theft, would get lost in the drama of the arrest. No, I said. No police yet. You want to do it at the wedding, Grant guessed. I want the jury to be present, I said. I want Logan to hear it. I want his parents to hear it. I want every aunt and uncle who called me selfish to hear exactly how much their good vibes cost me. Okay, Grant said, opening a new file on his laptop. Then we prepare the civil suit. We have the complaint ready to file on Monday morning, but for the wedding, we need a presentation. I am not bringing a PowerPoint, I said. No, Grant agreed. You are bringing the truth, but you have 90 seconds. That is the window before the shock wears off, and someone grabs the mic. He handed me a sheet of paper. This is the summary, he said. We call it the 90-second indictment. I read it. It was brutal. The condo was sold for $425,000. The signature was forged at 9 a.m. while Lily was in surgery. The money was wired to the wedding account at 2 p.m. Lily is the legal owner of the Fort Collins house. And the documents? I asked. Marla walked in, carrying a large manila envelope. She patted it affectionately. I have the originals, she said. The certified copies of the deeds, the transcripts of the voicemails, the bank transfer records. I am going to keep this in my oversized purse. It never leaves my side. If anyone tries to grab it, they lose a finger. You, Grant said to me, will carry the light version. He handed me a slim, white envelope. Inside this is a single page, Grant explained. It is a copy of the forged deed on one side and the deed to the Fort Collins house on the other. If they cut the mic, you hold this up. If they drag you off stage, you drop this on the table. It is the bullet that can't be dodged. I took the envelope. It felt light, but I knew it carried the weight of my entire future. One more thing, Grant said. The opening line. You have to hook them instantly. If you start with, I am so sad, people tune out. You have to start with a number. I nodded. I had been practicing it in the shower. I had been practicing it while staring at the ceiling at night. I am going to talk about the wedding gift, I said. A gift worth exactly $425,000. Perfect, Grant said. It sounds generous. It sounds like a sisterly brag. They will let you keep talking because they think you are complimenting them. By the time they realize it is an accusation, it will be too late. And the house? I asked. The Fort Collins house? That is the closer, Grant said. That is the mic drop. You don't mention that until the very end. That is the leverage that ensures they can't just laugh it off. We spent the rest of the afternoon refining the plan. We mapped out where I would sit, near the exit, but close enough to the stage. We mapped out Marla's position, flanking the sound system. We even discussed what to do if Brielle tried to physically attack me. Marla volunteered to tackle her, which I had to veto. By the time night fell, I was exhausted, but my mind was clear. I went into the guest room and looked at the calendar on the wall. Saturday, wedding day. I checked the clock. 12:08 a.m., past midnight. The wedding wasn't tomorrow anymore. It was today. I realized with a jolt that the rehearsal dinner was just hours away. The timeline in my head shifted. The confrontation at the coffee shop felt like a lifetime ago. But it was only yesterday. I looked at the white envelope on the dresser. They had tried to trap me with a piece of paper in a coffee shop. They had tried to bully me into silence. They had tried to steal my voice along with my property. But they had made one fatal mistake. They thought they were dealing with the daughter who wanted their approval. They didn't realize they were dealing with the landlord who wanted her rent. I turned off the light. 24 hours. In 24 hours, the champagne would be poured, the cake would be cut, and the house of Barry would come crumbling down. And I would be the one holding the sledgehammer. The wedding looked like a Pinterest board that had been brought to life by an unlimited line of credit. It was held at a vineyard estate that smelled of lavender and money. The grass was a manicured carpet of emerald green, the kind that looks like it has been trimmed with nail scissors. White chairs were arranged in perfect concentric semicircles facing a gazebo draped in wisteria and imported silk. There were nearly 200 guests. I watched them arrive from my vantage point near the back. They were a sea of pastel dresses and linen suits, adjusting their sunglasses and cooing over the floral arrangements. Every single peony, every crystal water goblet, every hand-calligraphed place card was a physical manifestation of my equity. I sat in the back row, on the far left edge. It was the seat usually reserved for distant cousins or the college roommate everyone had drifted apart from. My mother had assigned the seating chart. She wanted me visible enough to prove I was there, so the family didn't whisper about a feud, but distant enough that I couldn't ruin the aesthetic of the front row. A woman with a cane and a post-surgical grimace did not fit the vibe of ethereal summer romance. The ceremony began with a string quartet playing a modern pop song slowed down to sound classical. It was beautiful. It was nauseating. Brielle walked down the aisle. I had to give it to her. She looked stunning. Her dress was a cloud of lace and tulle, custom fitted, with a train that required 2 flower girls to manage. She was glowing. She looked like a princess who had never heard the word mortgage in her life. She looked at Logan with wide, shimmering eyes, and for a moment, I wondered if she even remembered how she got there. Denial is a powerful drug, and my sister was overdosing on it. Logan stood at the altar. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but he also looked tight. His shoulders were hunched up toward his ears. His smile didn't reach his eyes. As Brielle approached, he didn't have that look of overwhelmed joy you see in movies. He looked like a man trying to solve a complex equation in his head while someone shouted numbers at him. I caught his eye as Brielle reached the steps. He looked past her white veil, past my beaming parents in the front row, and locked onto me in the back corner. I didn't smile. I just sat there, my hands folded over the handle of my cane, wearing the beige dress my aunt had picked out. I looked like a statue of judgment. The ceremony proceeded. The officiant, a man with a tan so deep it looked painted on, droned on about love, trust, and partnership. He talked about how marriage is built on a foundation of honesty. And so, the officiant said, raising his voice slightly to address the crowd, if there is anyone here who has just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was heavy. Usually, this is the part where people shift comfortably, smiling because it is just a formality. But today, the silence had teeth. I saw heads turn. It started with Aunt Linda, then rippled through the cousins. People twisted in their seats, craning their necks to look at the back row. They looked at me. They were waiting for it. The rumors had been flying for 24 hours. They knew there was bad blood. They knew about the jealous sister narrative Brielle had spun on Instagram. They were hungry for drama. They wanted the scene. I felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes. I stayed perfectly still. I didn't stand up. I didn't shout. I didn't object. I let the silence stretch. I let it hang there for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. I saw my mother's shoulders stiffen in the front row. She didn't turn around, but I could see the muscles in her neck seizing up. She was terrified. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop. By saying nothing, I made the silence louder than any scream. I let the tension build until it was suffocating. "Wonderful," the officiant said, clearing his throat nervously to break the tension. "Then we shall proceed." I saw Logan let out a breath. He looked back at my parents again. He was watching them. He saw the way my father wiped sweat from his forehead. He saw the way my mother gripped her purse until her knuckles were white. He was realizing that the tension wasn't coming from me. It was coming from them. They were the ones afraid of the truth. The ceremony ended. They kissed. The crowd cheered. Petals were thrown. We moved to the reception tent. If the ceremony was expensive, the reception was obscene. The tent was the size of a cathedral, draped in white linen and illuminated by hundreds of Edison bulbs strung from the ceiling. There was a live swing band. There was an oyster bar. There was a champagne tower that was currently being filled by a waiter standing on a ladder. My table was number 19. It was located in the back corner, right next to the swinging doors that led to the catering kitchen. Every time a waiter walked out with a tray of appetizers, a blast of hot, greasy air hit my face. The clatter of dishes being stacked was constant. It was a deliberate insult. My parents had put me in the penalty box. They were telling me exactly where I ranked in the hierarchy of this family, somewhere between the cleaning staff and the exit. Aunt Marla sat next to me. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit that made her look like a judge on her day off. She placed her oversized purse on the table with a heavy thud. "They really put you by the trash," Marla noted. Lighting a cigarette, even though we were inside a tent, she dared anyone to stop her. "It is perfect," I said, sipping my water. "From here, I can see the whole room, and more importantly, the sound system control board is right behind us." "Strategically sound," Marla nodded. "How is the back?" "It feels like someone is welding my spine with a blowtorch," I admitted, "but I have enough adrenaline in my system to power a small city." We watched the dinner service. My parents were working the room like politicians. Dad was slapping backs, laughing too loud, refilling glasses. Mom was fluttering from table to table, accepting compliments on the decor as if she had hand-woven the tablecloths herself. They were avoiding table 19. They didn't look at us. They acted as if the back corner of the room didn't exist. Then came the speeches. The best man gave a drunk, rambling speech about college. The maid of honor, one of Brielle's sorority friends, gave a speech that was mostly about herself. Then, the band leader lowered the music. "And now," the MC announced, "the father of the bride would like to say a few words." My father took the microphone. He stood in the center of the dance floor, bathed in a golden spotlight. He looked flushed. He had been drinking steadily since the ceremony. He held a glass of champagne in one hand and the mic in the other. Thank you. Warren beamed, soaking in the applause. "What a night. What a crowd. You know, when Kendra and I started planning this, we wanted it to be perfect. Brielle is our baby. She deserves the world." He paused, looking at Brielle, who was sitting at the head table, dabbing her eyes with a napkin that probably cost $5. "But you know," Warren continued, his voice taking on that philosophical, self-righteous tone I hated, "nights like this don't just happen. They take a village. They take sacrifice. They take a family pulling together." I felt Marla stiffen beside me. "Don't do it, Warren," she whispered. "Don't be an idiot." "We live in a world where everyone is for themselves," Dad preached, pacing the floor. "But in the Barry family, we believe in the collective. We believe that when one of us shines, we all shine. We believe in sharing the load." He was doing it. He was justifying the theft in front of 200 witnesses. He was rewriting the narrative so that robbing me was actually a noble act of family unity. "And I want to acknowledge that," Dad said. He turned. He looked toward the back of the room. The spotlight followed his gaze, sweeping over the crowd until it landed on table 19. The light hit me in the face, blinding me for a second. "Lily!" Dad called out, his voice booming through the speakers. "Where are you?" "There she is, sitting in the back, humble as always." The crowd turned. 200 faces pivoted toward the kitchen doors. "Lily couldn't help with the planning because she had a little medical situation," Dad chuckled, dismissing my major surgery as a minor inconvenience. "But she helped in other ways, big ways. She stepped up when we needed it most. She understands that money is just paper, but family is forever." My blood ran cold. He was taunting me. He was publicly thanking me for the money he stole, banking on the fact that I wouldn't dare contradict him in this setting. He was using my silence as consent. "Come on up here, Lil," Dad shouted, waving his hand. "Come say a few words to your sister. Show everyone that you know how to sacrifice for the ones you love." The room applauded. They thought it was a sweet moment. They thought I was the generous big sister coming to give a toast. Mom, sitting at the head table, looked horrified. She was shaking her head slightly at Dad, trying to signal him to stop. But he was too drunk on power to notice. He thought he had me checkmated. He thought that by dragging me into the spotlight, he was forcing me to play along. I didn't move for a long moment. Then, I pushed my chair back. The scrape of the metal legs against the wooden dance floor panels was loud in the hush. I stood up. I reached for my cane. Click. I took a step. Click. The walk from table 19 to the center of the dance floor was about 50 feet. It was the longest walk of my life. The room went dead silent. The applause died down, replaced by a confused murmur. They saw the cane. They saw the rigid, painful way I moved. I wasn't walking like a happy sister. I was walking like a soldier marching to a court-martial. I didn't look at the crowd. I kept my eyes locked on my father. He was smiling. But the smile was starting to falter. He saw the look on my face. It wasn't the look of submission he expected. I took another step. Then, behind me, there was another sound of a chair scraping. Aunt Marla stood up. She didn't say anything. She just grabbed her oversized purse, clutched it to her chest like a shield, and started walking behind me. She was my flank. She was my witness. The crowd sensed the shift. You could feel the air leave the room. This wasn't a toast. This was a confrontation. "Oh, look," Dad stammered into the mic, trying to keep the mood light. "She brought backup. Aunt Marla. Everyone." Nobody clapped. I kept walking. The pain in my back was a rhythmic throb, keeping time with the tapping of my cane. I reached the edge of the dance floor. I was 10 feet away from my father. He looked nervous now. He lowered the microphone slightly. "Lily," he hissed, off mic, so only I could hear. "Don't you dare. Keep it short. Keep it sweet. Don't embarrass us." I stopped in front of him. I held out my hand. "The mic. Dad," I said. My voice wasn't amplified, but in the silence of the tent, it carried. He hesitated. He looked at Mom. She was pale as a sheet. He looked at Brielle. She was frozen, her glass halfway to her mouth. He looked at me. He saw his daughter, the one he had bullied and robbed. He thought he saw the same girl who had always folded. He handed me the microphone. I took it. It was heavy. It felt like a weapon. I turned slowly to face the head table. I looked at Brielle. She met my eyes. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in hers. She knew. In that second, looking at me standing there with a broken spine and a microphone, she realized that the check had finally bounced. I looked at Logan. He was leaning forward, his elbows on the table, watching me with an intensity that bordered on desperation. He wanted the truth. He was begging for it. I turned to the crowd. 200 strangers, my parents' friends, my relatives, the people who had called me jealous, the people who had judged me. I took a breath. I reached into the pocket of my beige dress and pulled out the slim white envelope Grant had given me. I placed it on the small cocktail table next to me. Right next to the wedding cake, I raised the microphone to my lips. Thank you, Dad, I said. My voice was steady, clear, and amplified to every corner of the tent. You are right. Sacrifice is what defines this family. I paused. I let the word hang there. You asked me to say a few words about my contribution. I continued. And I think that is fair. People should know exactly what went into making this night possible. I looked directly at the camera crew that Brielle had hired to document her perfect day. I will speak about the wedding gift, I said, my voice dropping to a register that commanded absolute silence. A gift worth exactly $425,000. 6 weeks ago, I began, my voice echoing slightly through the high-end speakers of the reception tent. I was lying on an operating table for 9 hours. The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the guests. I looked at the aunts who had whispered about me. I looked at the cousins who had blocked me. I looked at the wealthy friends of Logan's family who were wondering why the tone of the evening had shifted from celebration to deposition. I was undergoing a spinal fusion, I continued, keeping my cadence slow and rhythmic. I was unconscious, I was intubated, and during that specific window of time, while I was physically unable to speak or move, my parents, Warren and Kendra Barry, entered my apartment. I saw my mother try to stand up from the head table. Her face was a mask of panic, her mouth opening to shout something, to stop the train before it went off the rails. But she was too slow. They took the deed to my condominium, I said, and they sold it. They sold my home for $425,000 to a cash buyer. A gasp rippled through the room. It wasn't a theatrical gasp. It was the genuine, sharp intake of breath that happens when people hear something taboo in polite society. You do not talk about money, and you certainly do not talk about theft. They signed the closing documents using a forged power of attorney, I stated. They forged my signature, and they had it notarized by a man named Arthur Pren, who is currently under investigation for elder abuse fraud. Lily, stop! Dad shouted. He lunged for me. He actually took a step toward me, his hand reaching for the microphone. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. From the shadows near the catering entrance, a figure stepped forward. Grant Calder walked into the light. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing his charcoal litigation suit. He didn't look like a guest. He looked like the law. He stepped between me and my father. He didn't touch Dad. He just held up a hand. Palm out. I am Grant Calder, he announced, his voice projecting without a microphone. I am Lily Berry's legal counsel. If you touch my client, Warren, I will have the sheriff deputies waiting in the parking lot escort you out in handcuffs right now. Dad froze. He looked at Grant. He looked at the guests staring at him with wide, horrified eyes. He realized that physically wrestling a disabled woman and her lawyer on the dance floor was not a winning move. He backed down, his face a mottled purple of rage and humiliation. I turned back to the crowd. The money, I said, was wired to a joint account, and then it was spent. I reached into the envelope on the table and pulled out the single sheet of paper Grant had prepared. I held it up. This is the transaction record, I said. $425,000, gone in 48 hours. I turned slowly toward the head table. $15,000 for the flowers, I said, looking at the centerpieces. $12,000 for the wine. $80,000 for this venue. I looked at Brielle. She was shaking. She was gripping the tablecloth so hard her knuckles were white. She looked like a porcelain doll that had just been dropped on concrete. Everything you see tonight, I said to the room, the food on your plates, the band, the dress, it was paid for with the equity I spent 8 years building. It is not a gift from my parents. It is the liquidation of my life. You are lying! Mom screamed. She finally snapped. She rushed toward me, her heels clicking frantically on the dance floor. She is lying. She is on drugs. She is jealous of her sister. Don't listen to her. She reached for the mic, her fingers clawing at the air. I pulled the microphone back, just out of her reach. I looked her in the eye. Mom, I said. My voice was tired. You have been talking for 32 years. You have told me who I am, what I owe you, and how worthless I am compared to Brielle. You have said enough. I turned my back on her. It was the ultimate dismissal. But that is only half the story, I said to the crowd. Because when my lawyer looked into the property records to track the theft, we found something else. I saw Grant nod at me from the sidelines. This was the pivot. This was the moment the ground would open up. My parents told you that family is about sacrifice, I said. They told you that they have supported me. They told you that I should be grateful. I pulled the second document from the envelope. It was the warranty deed for the house in Fort Collins. I have a question for my father, I said, turning back to face him. He was standing near the cake table, looking deflated, like a balloon slowly leaking air. Dad, I asked, who owns the house at 742 Maple Ridge Drive? Dad's eyes went wide. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he was about to faint. He knew. He knew exactly what I had found. Lily, he croaked. Don't. Who owns it? I asked again. We do. Mom cried out from behind me. We have lived there for 20 years. No, Mom, I said. You haven't owned it for 14 years. I held up the deed. When Grandma Rose died, I explained to the room. My parents were facing bankruptcy and tax liens. They couldn't inherit the property without the government seizing it, so they put it in the name of the only person in the family with a clean record. I tapped the paper. Me? The silence in the room changed texture. It went from shocked to stunned. For 14 years, I said, my voice ringing with the absolute authority of the truth. My parents have lived in a house that is legally mine. They have paid no rent. They have signed no lease. They have treated me like a tenant in their lives, while they were actually guests in my property. I looked at my father. He was leaning against the table for support. He looked old. He looked defeated. He had spent his whole life playing the big man, the provider, the patriarch, and in 10 seconds, I had revealed him to be a squatter. You sold my condo to pay for a party, I said, because you thought I was helpless. You thought I had nowhere to go. You thought that if you took my home, I would have to come crawling back to you. I smiled. It was a cold, sad smile. But you forgot one thing, I said. You can't evict the landlord. I lowered the microphone for a second. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor broke the spell. Logan stood up. He looked pale. He looked sick. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trap door. He walked around the head table. He ignored Brielle, who was reaching out for his hand. He walked straight to my father. Warren, Logan said. His voice was shaking, but it was loud enough to be heard. Is it true? Logan, it is complicated, Dad stammered. It is family business. We were going to pay it back. Is it true? Logan shouted. Did you steal her house to pay for this wedding? Dad didn't answer. He looked at the floor. Logan turned to Brielle. Did you know? He asked. Brielle sat there, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. She looked small. She looked like a child caught with her hand in the jar. I just wanted it to be perfect, she whispered. I just wanted one day. You bought a party with your sister's life, Logan said. He looked around the tent, at the lavish decorations, the champagne tower, the band. He looked disgusted. He took the boutonniere off his lapel, a white rose that probably cost $50, and dropped it on the table. I can't do this, Logan said. He didn't scream. He didn't make a scene. He just turned around and walked out of the tent. Logan! Brielle screamed. She stood up to chase him, but her dress caught on the chair leg. She stumbled, falling to her knees in a pile of tulle and lace. She stayed there, sobbing, a bride abandoned in the wreckage of her own greed. I watched him go. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, but mostly, I felt relief. He had escaped. I turned back to the crowd one last time. I am not here to ruin a wedding, I said. I am here to settle a ledger. I looked at my parents. They were standing together now, huddled like survivors of a shipwreck. I have 2 documents in my lawyer's briefcase, I said. One is a civil lawsuit for fraud, conversion, and theft. The other is a formal notice to quit, an eviction notice for the property in Fort Collins. Mom let out a sob. However, I said, I am not you. I do not destroy people for image. I do not leave family homeless to prove a point. I took a deep breath. I am offering you a choice, I said. You will sign a confession admitting to the fraud. You will agree to a repayment plan for the full $425,000. Plus interest, you will pay me rent for the house in Fort Collins, starting next month, at fair market value. I paused. If you agree to this, in writing, tonight, I will not file the criminal charges. I will not evict you immediately. I will give you a chance to make it right. I leaned in closer to the mic. But if you refuse, I said, my voice hard as steel. If you try to lie, or spin this, or call me jealous one more time, I will file the papers on Monday morning. I will sell the house in Fort Collins, and you will explain to a jury why you forged the signature of your daughter while she was in surgery. I placed the microphone on the table next to the cake. Thump. The sound signaled the end of the show. I didn't wait for an answer. I didn't wait for them to beg. I turned around. Marla was waiting for me. She was smiling, a fierce, proud smile. She offered me her arm. I took it. I leaned on my cane. We walked out of the tent. Behind us. There was no applause. There was no music. There was only the sound of Brielle sobbing and the murmurs of 200 people realizing they were witnessing the end of the Barry dynasty. I walked out into the cool night air. My back hurt, my legs were shaking, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of my family. I had put it down. I walked to the car, and I didn't look back. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Nina Revenge Stories. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Where are you listening from? And what would you have done if you were in Lily's shoes? Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.